community radio stations as well to get the message across, and particularly to people where English might not be their first language. It was really important that materials were available in different languages as well. There are also weekly reports made available to our executive team. So it was clear, so we knew week by week what was happening with the statistics and reporting around domestic abuse as well. And there were also frequent meetings at a West Yorkshire level, which were organised by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And this was trying to understand what some of the regional trends were in West Yorkshire around domestic abuse as well. There was a national campaign also to work with supermarkets and pharmacies and GPs to try and link up some of the services and reporting incidents around domestic violence. You may be aware that the reports of domestic violence really increased during the lockdown period. So we heard national reports that there were maybe around 60 to 70% increase in domestic abuse reporting. In Kirklees,
YouTube is working.
An increase in reporting, and it was roughly around a 4% increase in police call-outs related to domestic abuse. So we didn't see the same spike overall. However, we did have some spikes on the main bank holidays, and also when there were weekends in the summer, particularly during the hot weather as well. Our biggest service pressure was around the independent domestic abuse advocate service, and they were generally dealing with more complex cases, which took longer as well. One of the things we also saw was that people wanted to report more informally, so they were reporting via webline, using web chats, and the police also rolled out an online reporting tool. So if anyone visited a charity, a domestic abuse charity website, or the police website at the time during lockdown, many will have seen screens which included a chat, but also a function where you could leave the page very quickly in case you were feeling unsafe. So there were some extra measures put in place. And also in Kirklees, one of the things that happened when lockdown eased, we've had about 3 lockdowns now, but we had a position when the first lockdown eased. The independent advocates went out with the police, the domestic abuse workers went out with the police themselves to see what was going on as well. So just some reflections. Really, one of the issues we have is around funding as well. I think you'll probably all be aware that domestic abuse funding, it's short term and you're always having to bid for funding. So that's groups, but also councils are having to do it all the time, and that's really not helpful, and that's something that we need to look at longer term as well. Just going on onto the BAME community, if you look at some of the statistics that are available, it does present a bit of a mixed picture. So overall, domestic abuse reporting for 2018 to 2019, there was about a 5.7% reporting of domestic violence in England and Wales. Now, for people of mixed ethnicity, it was at 14%. For Black people, it was at 7%. For white people, it was 5.6%, and for Asian people, it was 3.8%. We know the majority of those were women, but men are also, struggling with domestic violence as well. What we can't tell from those figures, though, is underreporting, and that's why we can't necessarily look at those stats and say that that's the accurate picture of what's going on. We know for some BAME communities, there's some distrust with the police, and there's chronic underreporting because of that. Also, there's evidence that BAME women are more likely to stay in abusive relationships due to the barriers associated with leaving, and they're more likely to suffer abuse for longer before they seek help. They're also more likely to seek informal sources of support as well before turning to the police or statutory agencies. And we also know in some communities there's a strong notion of protecting the community and the cultural integrity by not disclosing, and that pressure can come from the community or individuals. We know that a lot of BAME women are also apprehensive to disclose due to specific issues of racism. And we also know that another further barrier is for leaving domestic abuse is immigration status. So 1 in 5 BAME women have no recourse to public funds, and a subsection of victims do not report domestic abuse due to their immigration status. Unfortunately, some perpetrators use the fear of deportation as well as a control tactic. And we have seen tactics where someone's passport can be taken away from them, And unfortunately, we've seen tactics where someone tries to remove someone's immigration status, or actually takes a woman or the family back to their country of origin and leave them there as well, which is pretty shocking, really. And obviously, there is the issue around socio-economic status. We know how coercion can work with finances. So if a woman or a male don't have that, don't have any money, they don't also have close relationships if they're in a different country. So they don't have those networks that they can't go to. This is a real concern. And obviously, in some BAME communities, we're also concerned about honour-based violence and forced marriage. And we know those that can also involve not just the perpetrator, but it can involve the perpetrator's family, and it can also involve the victim's family as well. And there's lots of patriarchal notions which are linked to that as well. So I don't want to go on too long, because I've probably spoken too longer than I have. But some of the things that we need to talk about in terms of tailor-made, so in terms of support services, is making sure that they are tailor-made, they're appropriate for the services in that for the communities and that in that location, that the right language materials actually match the population groups in that area as well. And there has to be a delicate balance between informed approaches and stereotypical approaches as well. And that means learning from communities themselves and from lived experience of people who have gone through abuse as well. Not all BAME communities are homogeneous. We're all going to, the abuse or abuse affected by BAME communities can be different. And it's really important that any approach is person-centred. So I'll leave it there, Idris. I'm sorry if I spoke for too long. I think you're still on mute, Idris.
Yeah, Idris, you're on mute. I think we are using probably the most used phrase of 2020.
Is it better now?
I was going to start my speech with that joke.
Thank you for that, Harpreet, for your kind words. Now, second guest we have is Maxine Edwards. Maxine is a manager at the Women's Centre based in West Yorkshire. She is experienced in community associates and demonstrated history of working in the third sector, skilled in communication and social housing. I now call upon Maxine Edwards to say a few words.
Hi Idris, hi everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting us today. Like we've already said, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Women's Association do work with us closely, and we do fundraising campaigns for the Women's Centre a few times a year, so we appreciate all that support. What I want to tell you about today is, I have worked in the third sector in Kirklees and Calderdale now for 30 years and across different sectors, but I've worked for Women's Centre for 3 years. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Women's Centre, a little bit about how COVID and the lockdown have affected us at Women's Centre, and then a little bit about how it's affected us financially. Obviously, Harpreet obviously explained that it affects everybody financially at the moment, and it's even more difficult during COVID for funding, but we've been really fortunate. So I work at Women's Centre Calderdale and Kirklees, and we have various contracts and various pots of money that support different projects. Like Harpreet said, because it's really difficult to fund domestic abuse and women-focused services, mainly because some funders won't fund it because we're not open to everybody. Some of our Women's Centre spaces are women-only safe spaces. Although our Calderdale contract, we do the domestic abuse in Calderdale, Pennine do it in Kirklees, but we do the wraparound care, so we do mental health and wellbeing support in Kirklees as well. So we've had an effect on all parts of our Women's Centre, whether it be the mental health and wellbeing and the support we can give to women through that service, whether it be the domestic abuse contract. So our main areas of support, like I said, are domestic abuse and women's health and wellbeing. We also support women with practical issues. So it's not just about the domestic abuse. They might need help with parenting, managing debt, or immigration. Our services reach women at the most critical point and at crisis point. And women often come with really complex issues and more than one issue. So what we've seen during lockdown is that women are coming with more and more increasing amount of complex issues. So they're coming with presenting with more than one issue. So that could be chronic mental health issues, that they're in contact with the criminal justice system, that they've got refugee and asylum seeker claims that they need support with, drug and alcohol issues, they may be in poverty, as well as being victims of domestic abuse. In Kirklees as well, we have the Child Sexual Exploitation Project, so that brings a whole nother level of support with it as well. So during COVID, our service has changed. It's been a difficult time. Like Harpreet's already said, nationally there's been a large increase in the number of women calling the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. And we've had to change how we deliver our services, which has meant as a charity that we've had to become more technical. We've had to go out and get funding to be able to buy more laptops so staff can work at home and have access to fast internet. And where I live, I have to apologise because my internet's really a little bit dodgy, as Andrew probably knows. In Gulka and Balstamore, it's not the best. But so we managed to do that, and we were fortunate to get a grant, and we moved all of our services to phone and Zoom. Although some of our staff, domestic abuse contract in Calderdale, have had to go and meet women in parks and outdoor spaces in order to get them to a place of safety. What we've also seen during lockdown is a smaller increase than the national figures in the calls to our services. We have seen an increase, but the calls that we have are of a higher risk. Women are ringing who are at high risk, which means we need to get them out of their situation immediately. So that we've had an increase in that. The services we offer women, once we've got them rehoused and safe, we need to rebuild their confidence and make them understand what's happening to them. We run the Freedom Project, which is a training course for women. So they have been attending those on Zoom. So actually a positive that's come out of the lockdown is some of the women we've spoken to have preferred the smaller groups we deliver on Zoom with 6 people rather than a room full of 13 to 20 people, because they might be struggling with their mental health, with anxiety, and coming into a room of people you don't know is quite off-putting sometimes. So they've found some of the Zoom classes more beneficial. So we've been doing that across our services, so not just on the domestic abuse and the Freedom Programme, but on all of our therapies and counselling and one-to-one support, our volunteer networks, that we have about 60 volunteers at Women's Centre that help keep our services going, and that support the music therapy class, the walking groups. So that's all carried on, and the volunteers have been meeting on Zoom as well. So there's been a real online community. But again, it also highlights the other issue in some of our communities that are in poverty, is that some people don't have access to the internet. It's too costly. They might have access to some mobile data, but have you tried having a Zoom meeting on mobile data? It just disappears and it costs people a fortune. So I think there's a bigger issue than domestic abuse and mental health that's come out of COVID for us. An increase, like again, Harpreet's already referred to, in the people struggling with mental health issues. So our service in Kirklees has increased. We've had an increased number of women. And in counselling, we've had to close our books to the counselling services because we've been overwhelmed with people struggling with anxiety, isolation. Yeah, that's on the plus side. So nationally then, the figures, there's about 800,000 a year incidents reported, and that's without the underreporting that we don't know about. Am I all right to screen share, Idris? I've got some figures just from our centre, if it'll let me.
Yes, I'll ask the host to do that for
all
you.
right, okay.
All right. Yeah.
I'll share those in a minute then.
It should be okay to share now.
Yeah.
Maxine, you can share it now. So it's
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that?
It's coming through.
Yes.
Yes, now we can.
Yeah, as we can, yes.
Okay. So yeah, over 4,000 women coming through our doors at Halifax, over 2,000 victims of domestic abuse supported. Now that figure of 2,098 does include some men. We have a male worker that supports domestic abuse in our Halifax base. We work we work with lots of other organisations as well, and our liaison and diversion team worked with 250 women. 177 women were offered one-to-one counselling. 817 women came through our doors in Kirklees through the Women's Mental Health Service. And we have a migration service there as well. We work with Migration Yorkshire. 297 girls came through our 1325 project, which is for girls aged 13 to 25. And that's to help them with anxiety and depression, and if they've witnessed domestic abuse. And it's 6 children in every class that witness domestic abuse. That's the statistic nationally. So it's a bit of a concern that our children are witnessing this as well. So that's a bit of a concern for us. I think I've told you all my figures. So as a charity as well, we've really struggled with fundraising during lockdown, where we would normally have events starting obviously in March for International Women's Day. A lot of our events were cancelled. Our big fundraisers at theatres or going out collecting has decreased. But again, I think our communities are resilient and they pull together. We couldn't have the event with the Muslim Women's Association in March because the lockdown started, but they still managed to collect over £300 to support us, which is fantastic. Just to give you an idea, £10 makes a massive difference to a charity like ours. £10 means we can give women a bag of toiletries to take away with them when they come to us with absolutely nothing. So we do really appreciate everybody's support. There are ways that the community can help us as well as having... Once normality
starts to return.
Somebody's telly there. There are ways that people can support us. We've had toiletry amnesties where people provide us with toiletries. At the current moment in time, people are providing us with Christmas gifts. Women can join as a member. If every woman in Kirklees and Calderdale was a member at just £10 a year, we'd never need funding again. We have regular donators and supporters. You can also run fundraising events for us. If anyone has small businesses or large organisations that want to get involved with corporate supporting, then we can also organise that, and we have different levels of corporate support available. And I think we've had to move online to fundraise, and people have been donating online with our various campaigns to support women during this time, because whilst the numbers are going up, our grants don't go up as a charity. The money we get in doesn't increase proportionately. And our staff are so dedicated. It's not really a job you go into for the money. It's a job that they do for love, because they go above and beyond their job description to go out and see women. And as a staff team, we pull together and buy women what they need, what they're short of, or donate stuff ourselves. So I'd just like to say again that thank you very much for inviting us along tonight and for your continued support as well. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions anybody wants to ask?
Thank you very much, Maxine, for your talk today.
You're welcome.
Very, very informative as well. So the third guest I would like to invite, and he's been a serving member for our community for a long, long time, going back when I was a young teen then. Councillor, Training Minister Andrew Marchington. Andrew is currently Deputy Leader for Kirklees Liberal Democrats Group and Chair of the Children and Young People Security Panel. He's a former Chair of Kirklees Safe for Strong Community Partnership Board, the Kirklees Violent Task Group and West Yorkshire Police Authority Local Policing Committee. I will now call upon Councillor Minister Andrew Marchington to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Idris, and just echo Harpreet and Maxine's thanks for the invitation, and thank you for what you said. Yeah, and I'm also a minister in the Methodist Church with pastoral responsibility for the Church, the United Church in Marsden and Meltham Methodist Church. I, along with Harpreet, received a briefing at the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee a few weeks ago, and I don't want to reiterate some of the really good work that's happening locally through the council. She's given that information. I think over the years when I've been involved in trying to reduce levels of domestic abuse in Kirklees and West Yorkshire. I've always been impressed by the work that's gone on in Kirklees, and particularly the work with the domestic violence advocates. And I was really pleased that there could have been concerns during lockdown that there wasn't going to be access to that face-to-face service, and the point that Harpreet mentioned about when it felt safe to do so, that the domestic abuse advocates were actually going out with teams. I think that was really important to improve confidence. Yeah, and thank you again to Maxine for all the work she's doing with the Women's Centre, and that's going on. It's really important there to do that. I just wanted to give a bit of a faith perspective about, I think that was appropriate to do that, and what we can do. I picked up on what we were said, the reading from the Holy Quran about just, you know, what some of the causes of domestic violence, domestic abuse. Really worrying at the beginning about with people being at home for long periods of time, what was going to happen, and yeah, it just creates stresses and strains and tensions. And one of the things that we should be doing and can be doing is to look at how we can deal with those appropriately, so they don't lead to violence and they don't lead to abuse. And I think some of the services, I think some of the counselling services that Maxine's been talking about and offered is about when people find tensions at home, whether they're young or whether they're in a relationship, they shouldn't keep that to themselves. There's always the opportunity to talk to somebody about it. Now, that might be because you are being abused, but, and it's a more difficult thing to say, but if you are an abuser, if you're doing things that you're not happy about, you know that are not right, you should be going and talking to somebody about. You should be seeking advice. And I think some of that's been going on in Kirklees as well. We don't support that as much as we might like to do. We do support what we call the victims, the inappropriate victims, but also if people are feeling angry, they're feeling violent, then they should be going and talking to somebody about it. And actually, some of the things that have been out, the telephone conversations, the online stuff, means that is more accessible than it ever has been. You can do that, and some of the stigma associated with being a victim or a perpetrator has been taken. Just get it, you know, it's to do that, and it's not always easy to do that, but I would encourage people to do that. I think the other thing, in the longer term thing, and one of the things that's happened this year, and it's got lost a bit during lockdown, is about the sex and relationships education that's going on in schools. We should be getting to the point where actually talking to young people about what's appropriate in a relationship is getting better than ever. I know when I started out as a counsellor, it was after I taught, Idris is one of my former pupils, and I taught sex education when I was at Moor End High School. And we campaigned for years to have about relationships. What's appropriate when you're involved with somebody? And I was worried when I was first elected as a counsellor in the Colne Valley. I was worried about some of the attitude of a small minority of young people towards other young people about what they thought was acceptable in a relationship, and was particularly concerned about what young women felt was that it was okay for their boyfriends to do to them, and it isn't. It's not acceptable for people to treat you badly. And again, going back to the faith issue, and I know this is the issue from the Holy Quran, and it is in the Christian church and in all denominations, that issue about kindness. If being in a relationship should be a joyful thing. It's not always easy being in a relationship, but you should treat each other with kindness, with patience. There should be a sense of joy. And if that you don't find that in your relationship, or it's got to the point where it's just an awful place to be, then you need to do something about it. And I would hope that all faith communities are able to do that. And that's where I just want to move on a little bit about so I'm a member of the Methodist Church. We try not to do things alone, we do it in partnership. We've got a group called the Joint Public Issues Team, which is the Baptist Union, the Church of Scotland, the Methodist Church and United Reformed Church. We work together on these issues. And they presented a report in March, just being concerned about what was going to happen during lockdown. And So some of the things that were said in that report was about, again, providing support for the services that are available, and I'm really pleased. I'm really interested in the work you're doing, Maxine, and I would like to learn a little bit more about it. I'm going to, hopefully, if you've got some information, you can email that through to me. Because one of the things that faith communities can be doing is to support groups that are working with victims of domestic abuse, and that's what Joint Public Issues Team has been encouraging all, particularly Christians from those denominations to do. But we could all do that. I'm really pleased to hear that the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association are doing fundraising. We can do fundraising. And to support that, and I'm going to get that on the list of some of the fundraising that we're going to be doing, and bring that up with my colleagues as well to raise that as an important issue. What fundraising sometimes also does, it raises awareness, and you know, and you don't like to think it's happening in your community, but some of the statistics that both Maxime and Harpreet have shown shows how prevalent domestic abuse is, and we can raise that in faith communities that sometimes we're not as aware of what might be going on in our communities or in our congregate. I mean, frighteningly, in our congregate faith community, that we know that there's abuse going on. There must be going on, but we're not aware of it, and we need to be aware of that as well. And I think our faith communities need to be safe spaces for people to come and talk to people. So if you know, and we are getting, because safeguarding, I know there's issues around safeguarding, but because safeguarding procedures are getting so much better than they used to be, if a minister or a volunteer within a faith community, you say or you suspect there's abuse taking place, or you hear about it, there's mechanisms for dealing with that. But I would hope that if somebody was was subject to abuse, then they would feel they could go and talk to somebody in that situation, and there'd be mechanisms to deal with that. So it's faith communities and faith should be a safe space to go and speak to people about. I just want to finish as well about there was a concern about domestic abuse at the beginning of lockdown. I think Harpreet quoted the calls to service have gone up, you know, it's about 4%. It's not a very high, but I mean, one incident is one incident too many, but things are a lot better. The way it's dealt with, the services that Maxime's providing, the way the police did it is much better than it used to be. I've been around long enough. When it was the recession in the late 2000s, 2008, we were really concerned there was going to be a spike in domestic abuse, and it did go up slightly. But then I saw the figures from the recession during the 1990s, and it was absolutely horrendous. It was 3 times the level of abuse that people are experiencing now. And we're heading in the right direction, but there's still a way to go. And then when I was chair of the Community Safety Partnership, there were over 2,000 repeat incidents of domestic abuse every year. Repeat. So these people have been abused, and then they've been abused again. And we struggled to get central government to reckon. We wanted that to be a target. We wanted to reduce that figure, and we struggled. We're not struggling anymore. You know, when local authorities and when faith communities are wanting to deal with this, people are listening. And we do need to get a point where everybody, you know, people knows this isn't acceptable, but we need to create safe spaces. So, and we can get a bit selfish about this as well, because yes, there's issues in our own communities and in our country, but we need to remember those people throughout the world who don't have access to abuse services, who might be, you know, they're experiencing lockdown, they're in even more desperate situations than we find ourselves in Kirklees, and they're victims as well. And we need to promote that, and I hope with the Ahmadiyyans connection throughout the world that you sort of raise that as awareness, so that people around the world are. And I just want to finish with this thought, and this again is from the Joint Public Issues Team, and the way they raise it in, you know, home should be a safe space. Should be a safe space. Everybody should feel you go home. So, you know, and that should be a safe place to be. And if it's not, then people need to be able to do something about that. But perhaps we can all do things in the future to make sure that homes are safe spaces for young and for old, for whatever status or whatever relationship people are in. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, Sarah, and it's really been really interesting listening to the other contributors so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for your kind words. And like I said, it's a tough task as well. You're doing COVID-19. That's everything. You know, it's just up in the air at the moment. Our final speaker now is Mansour Clark, a missionary of the Ahmadiyya community, Muslim community. He's a British Imam and he's a broadcaster and a public speaker. I'll now call upon Imam Mansour Clark to say a few words regarding today's topic.
Thank you very much. In the name of God, the most gracious, the ever merciful. So having you stolen my thunder with my joke about you're on mute, I'm also very acutely aware of the fact that everyone either has books, curtains, or a fireplace behind them, and I've just got this boring magnolia wall, so you'll have to bear with me. The thing is, in today's day and age, we are living in a society where it's all about the rat race. It's all about how much can I consume? It's all about me, me, me. And people take that into their jobs. They take it home to their wives, to their husbands, to their children, to their friends, to their family. And that's all that life becomes. Life becomes about how much can I take from you to make my life better. Of course, we understand that humans weren't designed to live in isolation. We live together, and the meaning and the purpose and the security and the peace we give to those around us is indeed the same that is then returned back to us. Now, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, I'm sure you all know, operates all around the world, establishing clinics, maternity hospitals, providing legal care, financial care, pastoral care, education, training, skills, vocational training, whatever it is. Basically, we try to make society a better place. And I think that's a very fundamental thing. But that's not just something that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community talks about. That indeed is something which is very integral to people who believe not just in God, but indeed in our basic morality as humans. As a Muslim, I believe and I'm taught in two fundamental concepts. They're called the Huquqain, which means the two rights. We have the right of God and the right of God's creation. And if you don't look after even one of these, it's impossible for you to maintain an identity as a true believer in God. There is no point in sitting in a darkened room and praying and in prostration and praying to God if when you go out, you are a mean and terrible person to those around you. So that's an important thing to remember. When we are getting married in Islam, there is the recitation of a number of verses. Now, these are fixed verses that have been told to us by the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And they're recited at the beginning of every nikah ceremony, so every ceremony of marriage. And one recurring theme, one word that is repeated, is a word of taqwa. Now, taqwa is an Arabic word which can loosely be translated as righteousness, but that doesn't do it justice. Taqwa literally means, so if righteousness literally means the fear of God, if we were to talk about it colloquially, but that's not what the real meaning. The real meaning is to do something because you know that it makes God happy, and to not do something because you don't want to upset God, because of how much you love God. Now, when this word taqwa is mentioned so many times in the marriage ceremony, that it means there's something there for us to reflect upon. And that is, when you are in a marriage or when you are in a relationship, your actions should not be because of fear of some sort of being reprimanded or punished as a result of it. You don't not abuse your partner because you think you might be taken to court or you might be imprisoned. It's a very basic understanding that you do it because of the fact that you're in a relationship and you don't want to cause harm to the person in front of you. Just doing the small things which might seem mundane, but as soon as you start seeing them as being beneficial and valuable because they make the person with you happy, that is when marriage truly becomes a lot better. Now, I got married 9 years ago. I've got 3 beautiful children. Some say I rushed it, but there we go. I'll talk about a little bit about my family a little bit later on. There's something interesting coming up. Along with taqwa, there's also the concept of trust. The Quran tells us, "Qulu qawlan sadida," that always say the true and straightforward thing. Because often we find in relationships that those seeds of doubt and mistrust can be sown when we put importance over what we're saying above and beyond the importance and the sanctity of the person that we're saying them to. And often when we see this breakdown of trust, that's very often the first step which leads to this breakdown of relationships, this breakdown of our economic understandings, how we work together as a family unit. And often this can lead to issues that we see which are very prevalent, especially now in COVID-19. I love the way that Andrew drew attention towards the fact that in COVID-19, because of this amalgamation, this forcing together of people, we're having such huge amounts of stress. And it's almost like we're in this a pressure cooker, because people can't leave the house, people can't do what they're used to doing. And suddenly the same pressures that you can vent when you're outside, and a little bit of road rage here and there, or getting angry at work, suddenly all of that's bottled up at home. And it's so important, as the previous speakers have said, to find the routes where you can vent, where you can express yourself, and to find the ways of looking at how you can develop yourself as a person. Now, there's lots of other things I want to talk about. I'm acutely aware of the fact that I, A, talk very quickly, and B, blabber on. So, of course, by all means, if I go over, please do either cut my call off or tell me to be quiet. I'm happy to do both. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, said that the best among you is he who is best with his family. And of course, the word he being here, both referring to men and to women. And of course, we understand the very basic concept that charity begins at home. So that we have so many of these sayings, and yet oftentimes we forget that they actually relate to us in real life. That charity may begin at home, but also so does kindness, so does love, so does compassion, empathy, sympathy, being a good human being. You can't be a tyrant at home and you're a saint outside. That's not how it works. You should practice what you preach. And if you are not creating love and harmony in your own society, how can you be trusted with doing anything outside? The worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the community of which I'm an imam, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed, he gave some very valuable advice, which is very simple. Yet indeed, I printed it out and put it on my door inside my house. And it's make the atmosphere of your home one of peace and one of love. The words were, make the atmosphere of your home one of love and peace. And this is such an important motto to live by. And it seems so obvious, but think about the actions that we do at home. Is every single action adjudged by this basic principle? Will this create love and peace, or will it create animosity and tension? We live in a society, as I said in the beginning, of a rat race, where we want everything for ourselves. And we think about the rights that we have over other people. But very rarely do we think about the rights that we need to give other people, our responsibilities to our neighbors, to those around us, because evidently domestic violence is one branch of an individual who is unable to control themselves, an individual who's unable to control his or her anger, who believes that their rights supersede the rights of others. And in a society where we see this justice being eroded away, where we see the concept of giving rights being lost and only looking at your own rights, what can you attain? This is simply a symptom of that disease. One very interesting anecdote that I always love is about a father and his son. And it's about the impact of things that we say and what we do. It's about a son. He goes to his father, and the son is incredibly rude. He's insolent, he swears, he gets angry a lot. And after exhausting all other methods, the father says, right, from now on, every single time you say something rude, every single time you get angry, I want you to go into the garden, take these nails, and I want you to hammer a nail into the fence. Okay? Started off every day, 4 or 5 nails. It's hard work hammering a nail into a fence. If any of you ever tried, I'm sure you guys have. 2 days, 3 days, a month goes past, and gradually the frequency of hammering the nail into the fence goes down until it's 1 a day. Then it's none. So he runs to his father and goes, oh, Dad, I've got no more nails left. And he goes, okay, now for every day you're not rude, take a nail out. And he does so. Again, months go by. All the nails get taken out. Again, he runs to his father, very happy. Dad, there's no nails left. Dad goes, right, come with me. He walks him down the path into the garden, to the back fence. He says, what do you see? And the son's very happy. He says, I see absolutely nothing. The nails are gone. He goes, look carefully, look closer. And when he looked, he saw the fence riddled with holes. And he said, that's the impact. Because when you say sorry or apologize for something, you may pull the nail out, but you will always leave a hole. And everything you say, everything you do, leaves a hole in the person that you intended it towards. And it really, for me, it really brings home the importance of us, not just after the event saying sorry. It's about realizing the impact, the holes that we poke in people and in society by what we say and what we do. I said that I'd speak about my family, and I've got this. I'll end on this. So I have a beautiful wife and 3 lovely children. Masroor, who's 7, Nagasha, who's 4, and Zara, who's 1.5 years. And she likes punching me in the morning. That's domestic violence in another sense, but nevertheless. My son, I've been telling him about how fathers back home should be helping as much at home as the wives do. There's no such roles as such that we have to be adhering to, and men and women should be working together for the betterment of society. I said this. My son comes up to me when my wife was about to do the Hoover, and he said, Abba, that's what he calls me, you should do the Hoover. And I was thinking, oh, okay. And I said, why? He says, well, Mama did it yesterday, and now it's your turn. He's 7. He's 7. I was thinking, what have I raised? And he stands up and he stood there and waited for me to get up and do the Hoover. And I was like, okay, it's time for you to go to bed. Go. He's like, no, do the Hoover first. And the next day he woke up and he took a report from my wife as to whether I did the Hoovering or not. And I think that really drives home the importance, not just for us to understand and to implement it, but also to teach the next generations as well. Because we need to raise children who understand the importance, the respect, and the sanctity of human life, man or woman, child or elderly. I think that's what's really important. So again, it boils down to taqwa, doing things for the sake of making the person that you love happy, and the fact that charity indeed begins at home, which is why we believe as Muslims, indeed many other people, that on the Day of Judgment, the character witness of a person is their partner. And if your partner doesn't believe that you're a good person, it doesn't matter what the world thinks. So indeed, charity, love, empathy, and everything else all starts at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mansour Clark, for your inspirational speech. Really enjoyed that. Now I'll hand over to our regional leader, Lutf Rahman, for vote of thanks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for your time. And before I close, I have a couple of questions. We have some time in hand. We're going to be asked if anyone can submit. So the few questions have been sent directly to me for different speakers. So if I'm okay to go through that. Andrew, there's the first one for you. Saying like the question is, well, as I said for Andrew, that why do we think we are still talking about violence against women in 21st century? Shouldn't we have progressed by now? So that is no longer an issue. Why still it is there? Over to you, Andrew.
As I said at the beginning, I mean, one incident of domestic abuse is one incident too many. And there's a danger that because domestic abuse is still prevalent, there's still too much of it going on, that we're concerned about not doing anything. And actually, really pleased what Maxine said. There have been opportunities during lockdown to improve the services that we deliver. There's an opportunity to do things better. There's always the opportunity to do things better. And what we need to do, we need to get to a point where, I think all the speakers, we treat each other with the love and the care and the kindness which we would all expect. So, and that's my vision. And I know it's a vision for a lot of people. I'm heading and working towards a world in partnership where we can look back and say domestic abuse is a thing of the past. But I know that's a journey. I'm pragmatic about it. I know that there's a journey ahead, but we need to keep, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, reduce the amount of domestic abuse that goes on. And when somebody is sadly abused or unfortunately abused, they know there's somebody they can turn to. There's somebody they can speak to. There is a place where they can be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. I think there's a next question. It says for panel and particularly for Maxine. So we have heard a lot about abuse of women. What about the abuse, mental and physical, of men? So this hidden problem as men are too ashamed to talk about. So are we dealing with it, and how you think we can do something about it?
Okay. Yeah, I think, like everybody's already said about the kindness and education of our children, that teenagers think that controlling behaviour is acceptable. So education, definitely. We do definitely have reporting of male abuse. I know the figures are predominantly women in our service at the moment, and there is underreporting. So out of those 2,098 cases, about 40 of those are men each year that we support. We have a male domestic abuse worker in Calderdale, and Pennine Domestic Violence in Kirklees also support male victims. I think that, yes, you're right, there's an underreporting in men, and they often might feel ashamed having been in a controlling relationship, violent relationship, whether it's, you know, economic abuse. And I think just spreading the word, having conferences like this and people talking about it openly, when you have fundraisers and events for charities, it is raising awareness. I think I'm happy to see that it's more prevalent. With the police now share a lot about domestic abuse. There are adverts on the news. If you go back 10, 20 years ago, people didn't talk about domestic abuse. So I think it's a case of the more we talk about that this happens to men too, and happens to people in same-sex relationships as well. The more we talk about abuse, well, the more we talk about any sort of violence, whether it's, you know, rape or child sexual exploitation, or I think that the more we talk about it, the better it is. And like Andrew's already said, as long as people know there's a place for them to go and that they can be heard, whether it's at their place of worship or whether it's at a centre like ours, it's just about spreading the word, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maxine. Next one, this is very nicely said, so that it's more related to Harpreet, to you, so I'd rather pass it to you, the question. Saying that, okay, under the current circumstances and COVID-19 situation, the country has taken a great amount of debt. And this is likely to lead us more cutbacks and reduction in fundings in future years. How will all these services be maintained, and particularly supporting services with less money? Do you think that will be more of an issue, or more problem will come in future? How you see it?
Yeah, I think this is going to be difficult, really. I mean, one of the problems is that at the moment, the way domestic abuse services are funded, it's very short term. So people are running around trying to bid for stuff. You know, Maxine will know this, she's nodding her head there. Local authorities themselves are having to bid for things, and a lot of time they're given. So actually, during the COVID period, there was a number of funding schemes through the Ministry of Justice, and also through lots of police and crime commissioners across the country. But again, the problem is it is limited. It can be quite time specific. It can be limited in terms of how you can spend it. And you might have 2 weeks before the deadline of it. So already services are so stretched. And then they've got 2 weeks to fill in the application when they're trying to do the normal day job. So that's got to change. It's got to be more mainstream funding, and they shouldn't have to be running around every 5 seconds. Now, there is a domestic abuse bill that should be going through Parliament and should be enacted in April 2021. So we'll have to see. I know there's some concerns about that as well. But really, what we need to make sure is funding is far more sustained. And also, local authorities have had massive cuts. Kirklees Council's lost 60% of their budget due to austerity. So again, local government also needs to be funded properly so we can make sure that services are sustained. But we will continue to raise that issue, and I know a number of MPs are as well. So we'll keep making that point.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's another one. I think it's I'll ask Maulana Mansoor Clark Saab if he can take this question. That we represent different faiths, so that in this desperate times, why do you think more people are not praying, looking for God for guidance? Have people lost hope? Is so much desperation, or they will eventually come to it with this whole circumstances going on around?
So a loaded question, but nevertheless, I think look, as a theist, I believe whenever I am down, whenever I feel that I'm at my wit's end, whenever I think that there's nothing else to turn to and I'm staring into an abyss, for me, my solace, my rock is God. And I believe that my wife is all the better of a wife and I'm all the better of a husband because of our belief in God. Of course, I'm not as naive to think that absolutely everyone feels that way. But what I think importantly at this time is everyone needs to have a rock. God loves, we are all God's children. God loves all of us. I personally believe that He exists. I personally believe that everything that I do is for a purpose. And I believe that what everyone else does is for a purpose as well. I think finding God is beneficial to us. God, of course, is waiting for us to find Him, but it is beneficial to us. But I think the focus, when somebody doesn't have a roof over their head or food in their stomach, or is running away from an abuser, often people don't think at that time that God is there. And maybe it would help them. For me, it would definitely help me. But it's our responsibility, first and foremost, to be there for them. Because if we believe in God, then we need to be the people that stand up to stop that kind of abuse happening. So that is the core teaching that we need to focus on. Them finding God, of course, is very important. But first, we need to help them away from the horrific situations that they find themselves in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I'm just cautious of time. The topic is so wide, we can carry on and go on about it. I'm really thankful to Kausar Harpreet for her time, and I think the way you explained how the numbers and how is actually impacting directly, and how mental health is also becoming more and more issue. And thanks for Maxine for all the details and help that you are doing, and all the 60 volunteers team you have. And we are more than happy, proud to support, and will carry on supporting. And hopefully together we know that we can make a place better. Like Andrew said, we need to make sure that we must have some place where we say, okay, everything, the home should be a safe place. So thank you very much for Minister Andrew for your time. Thank you, Maulana Mansoor Saab. Thank you, all the members who have attended, and Idrisa for hosting it. And you can't say much thanks again for everyone. So we have a normal tradition that we end all our formal sessions with silent prayers. So feel free to join in whichever way you want to pray or say silent. If I can request Maulana Mansoor Clark Sahab to please lead us in silent prayers.
Sure. Of course, again, just for everyone, if that wasn't clear, we end ours in a form of silent prayer by raising our hands. You may wish to join however you wish to or not. It's entirely down to you. Please join me in silent prayer. Ameen.
Thank you very much again, and for this, for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
For joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Maxine, I'll send you an email soon anyway. So
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you later.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thanks. Thanks for the invitation.
Hi,
It's been a
Andrew.
really
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Hi, Fatih. Yeah, fine.
Thank you.
Good. See you later.
See you later.
See you later, Andrew.
Bye.
Thank you.